Hello YouTube, this is Dr. Ronald W. Satz, founder and chair of the International Society of Unified Science and president of TransPower Corporation, a commercial and custom software manufacturing and certified systems engineering company. I work as a theoretical physicist and as a systems and mechanical engineer. Now, by now most of you know that my theoretical physics mentor was Dewey B. Larson. What I've done over the past many decades, actually around 50 years, is to make all of Dewey's work fully computational. But Dewey B. Larson was also more than that. He was a theoretical economist. And I've also made his work in economics fully computational. And this is what my paper is about. Theory of Microeconomics and Macroeconomics, Larsonian Econophysics. Larsonian meaning from Dewey B. Larson. If you haven't already, please watch part 1 first before going to this part, which is part 2. So today we're going to look at the principles of economics. This is not your father's or grandfather's economics. This is way more scientific. It supersedes all the other theories out there. Now, it's kind of close to Austrian economics, except that it's much more computational. All right, so here we go. Principles. The fundamental component of the economic mechanism. You can look at all kinds of economics books, but you won't find what the fundamental component is. So, reading from my paper, energy conversion plays a major role in physical science, biological science, and engineering science. In mechanical engineering, for instance, available energy is defined as the maximum amount of the total energy of a process or a set of processes that can be converted to mechanical work. The remainder is unavailable energy. Whereas according to thermodynamics' first law accounting, energy input equals energy output. In thermodynamics' second law accounting, available energy gain equals available energy loss. Table 8 of reference 28, the author's doctoral dissertation, which is Theory and Design of the New Rational Combustion Engine, shows that for a regenerative Brayton cycle engine, energy input is comprised solely of the fuel. The energy output is then the net indicated mechanical work, the coolant energy, the duct heat losses, and the exhaust cooling. Table 8 of reference 28 follows with the components of available energy gain, including intake on the compression side, compression, regeneration, and combustion, and with the components of available energy loss through the air filter silencer, throttle, the various ports, intake on the expansion side, expansion, duct heat losses, regeneration, exhaust silencer, cooling, and release. Now the question is, what is the fundamental component of the economic mechanism which is analogous to available energy in mechanical engineering? Answer: purchasing power. None of the conventional economics textbooks listed in the references contain any mention of a fundamental component of economics. If they discuss purchasing power at all, it is only considered to be an antecedent to demand or as part of purchasing power parity in discussions of international trade. However, by inspection, one can see that in the production process, purchasing power is gained at each step, whereas in the consumption process, purchasing power is lost, whether quickly or over a long period of time. And of course, purchasing power produced equals purchasing power consumed. This is a new expression of Say's law. Okay, now, let's discuss the fundamental equation of the economic mechanism. Variables in economics can be expressed in terms of goods, in which case they are referred to as real quantities, or they can be expressed in terms of currency, in which case they are referred to as nominal or money quantities. Purchasing power B can be represented in real or nominal money terms of unit price P and volume, i.e. the number of units, V, as follows. So B sub real equals P sub real times V in terms of goods. B sub nom equals P sub nom times V in dollars, or whatever currency you want to use. Ordinarily, nominal variables are assumed, so if the subscript nom, which stands for nominal, is absent, the variable is nominal. So we could just say B equals P times V. If we let the subscript prod mean produced, and the subscript cons mean consumed, then our form of Say's law can be expressed as B consumed equals B produced. Say's law, in analogy with available energy loss, equals available energy gain. Okay, you have that? Of course, a small quantity of goods may be stored in inventory, either by the producer or by the consumer, for a short or long period of time, but eventually the goods or services are consumed in one way or another. Now, subsection C, reservoirs between the producer and the consumer. The goods or money purchasing power stream moves from the producer to the consumer. In between, there may be various reservoirs from which money or goods may be put into the stream, or into which money or goods may be taken out of the system or stream. This means that the consumer price is not necessarily the same as the producer price, as we will see. This has a detrimental effect on the operation of the economic mechanism, causing either inflation or deflation, but a method to correct the problem will be presented in the macroeconomics section. So these reservoirs can be considered to be like storage centers, like inventory, for example. All right, now subsection D, 17 fundamental principles. Yes, there are 17 fundamental principles in Larsonian Econophysics. Now that we have identified the fundamental component of economics, which is purchasing power, and the fundamental equation of economics, which is P equals B over V, the principles governing the economic mechanism naturally follow. Larson, in reference to pages 235 to 237, sets forth these 17 principles with comments added by the present author in square brackets. Okay, so principle 1. Purchasing power is created solely by the production of transferable utilities, and it is not extinguished until those utilities are destroyed by consumption or otherwise. Principle 2. Only goods can pay for goods. And I say here in the brackets, money is obviously an intermediary. Principle 3. Purchasing power and goods are simply two aspects of the same thing, and they are produced at the same time, by the same act, and in the same quantity. Principle 4. Exchanges between individuals or agencies at the same economic location, the same location with respect to the economic streams, have no effect on the general economic situation. This is because the goods have already been produced and paid for originally. Transfers between consumers do not alter the economic situation. So if you have a used item and you sell it, it simply does not affect the general economic situation, because it doesn't matter which consumer has the product, really. Principle 5. The income to the producer from goods produced is exactly equal to the expenditures for labor and the services of capital. The net result to the producer is 0. So nothing is left over unless one wishes to count reserves, but these actually belong to the suppliers of capital. So the producer has to pay for labor, and he has to pay for the services of capital, that is interest on whatever is borrowed, etc. Principle 6. The circulating purchasing power arriving at any point in the stream is equal to that leaving the last previous processing point, plus or minus net reservoir transactions, and that's obviously simple algebra. Principle 7. Except as modified by reservoir transactions, the purchasing power, either money or real, available in the goods market is equal to the purchasing power expended in the production market. Purchasing power expended in the production market equals purchasing power available in the goods market for consumers to consume. This is another form of Say's law. Principle 8. Any net change in the levels of the consumer purchasing power reservoirs results in a corresponding change in the money price level in the goods market, except insofar as it may be counterbalanced by a net change in the levels of the goods reservoirs. So levels of consumer purchasing power reservoirs influence money price level in the goods market. The goods reservoirs can usually be neglected. That's like storage and inventory. Now, of course, the consumer reservoirs might be, what you have in savings, what you're storing dollars under your mattress, whatever. That's a reservoir. All right, so principle 9. The market price levels are independent of the volume of production. So volume of production does not influence money price levels. Principle 10. Any net flow of money from the consumer reservoirs to the purchasing power stream or vice versa causes a corresponding change either in production volume, production price, or both. So money flow from consumer reservoirs may increase or decrease production volume, price, or both. Principle 11. Arbitrary increases or decreases in wage rates have no effect on the volume of production or the ability of consumers as a whole to buy goods. So this means that attempts by labor unions to increase wage rates do not change the ability of consumers as a whole to buy goods, because merely a change in wage rate without a change in production cannot change the ability of consumers as a whole to buy goods, obviously. Principle 12. Voluntary market price changes by producers have no effect on the volume of production or the ability of consumers as a whole to buy goods. Principle 13. All consumer purchasing power must be used for the purchase of goods from producers. It cannot be used for the purchase of goods already in the hands of consumers or for raising the prices of such goods. So when you just exchange, a used item to somebody else, you're not really using up your consumer purchasing power, because really it's got to be used for the purchase of goods from producers. Principle 14. The quantity of money existing within an economic system has no effect on prices or on the general operation of the system, except insofar as the method by which money is introduced into or withdrawn from the system may constitute a purchasing power reservoir transaction. So it's not simply the quantity of money within the economic system. This is a major problem with even with some conservative economists. One has to consider the velocity of money. The velocity of money is as important as quantity of money. Money is neutral in the long run, but not in the short run. Okay? So velocity of money is how many transactions with that same currency occur within, say, a period of time like a year. Principle 15. Credit can make goods available to one individual or group of individuals only by diverting them from other individuals. So credit is certainly not infinite. And principle 16, the cost of the services of capital is fixed by competitive conditions independently of productivity. And by the way, cost of capital is not varied by much over the centuries, but unfortunately central banks have a tendency to fix interest rates, which then cause distortions in the market. And I've got to say here parenthetically that these artificially low interest rates set by the central banks are just killing seniors. It's difficult to save under such circumstances. These interest rates are artificial, they're fake, and they distort the system. And then finally, principle 17, average real wages are determined by productivity and are equal to total production per worker less the items of cost that are determined independently of productivity. And these are taxes and capital costs. So really, productivity is what counts. In paying workers, it's productivity, period. Now, quoting from Larson. Here in these 17 basic principles and the general economic equation, which Larson expresses as P equals B over V, are the teachings of economic science as they apply to the subject matter under consideration. These principles rest firmly on solid facts, not on assumption, speculation, or guesswork, and they've been derived from those facts by processes which are logically and mathematically exact, even though extremely simple. Because of their factual nature, they are specific. In addition to being specific, these principles are universal. Unlike many of the conclusions of conventional economics, they are not limited to any particular economic system or to any special set of conditions. They governed the cave dwellers in their strenuous efforts to earn a living at the dawn of history, and they will apply with equal force to the streamlined multi-cylinder economic machine of the far distant future. They govern economic processes, not merely the systems of which these processes are constituent parts, and they are applicable to the processes wherever and under whatever system they may appear. The familiar contention that a socialistic economy is subject to a set of principles that differ from those which rule our individual enterprise system is as absurd as if we were to contend that the laws of physics applicable to a concrete bridge are not the same as those which apply to a steel structure. All right, so did the principles. Now, moving to section 2, Microeconomics. Subsection A, stages of economic development. The human species has existed for approximately 200,000 years. And by the way, anthropologists keep changing their years, but apparently right now it's said to be 200,000 years. In that long period of time, our species has gone through these 4 economic stages. And this comes from reference to pages 25, 26, page 44, page 65, and page 73. 1. Each economic unit, whether an individual, family, or tribe, obtains and consumes its own products. This is the amoeboid stage, so there's no trade, it's just individual production, period. 2. Stage 2. Trade develops between individuals, families, and tribes. Goods are exchanged for other goods. This is the barter stage, and it illustrates principle number 2 in action. Barter is a single-step process. So if I pick strawberries and you pick blueberries, we can exchange some of each of our products, and that's just barter. All right, so 3. Money is introduced. Reference to page 73 states, quote, this activates the circulating purchasing power circuit and also results in a separation between producer and consumer in the goods market. The goods market is the consumer market. The producer exchanges goods, purchasing power, for money, which passes through the inoperative production market into the hands of the same individual in his capacity as a consumer. He then completes the cycle by exchanging the money for goods, articles of consumption, in the consumer section of the goods market. Reference to page 78. Continuing. The producer starts from zero and makes a certain advance outlay for labor, capital, and materials, and he endeavors to sell his finished products for a price which will reimburse him for his actual expenditures, and in addition will give him a satisfactory rate of return on the capital that has been invested. End quote. This is the medium of exchange stage, or sometimes referred to as a small farmer or sole proprietor stage. Money makes for a 2-step process. Okay, economic stage 4. Production and consumption are handled separately. From reference to page 65. By this innovation, the original single-step barter transaction, which was expanded to a 2-step process through the use of a medium of exchange, has now become a 4-step process. Now here's an example. The cobbler, who is still in the 3rd economic stage so far as his own personal productive efforts are concerned, exchanges the goods, purchasing power that he produces for money, and then completes the transaction by exchanging this money for goods, articles of consumption. The new helper, which the cobbler hires, participates in a cycle of an entirely different character. He never handles goods as purchasing power at any time. He exchanges his labor for money, and then exchanges money for goods, articles of consumption. But this is only half of the full exchange cycle. The money that the helper receives comes from the cobbler, not from the ultimate consumer. To complete the transaction, it is necessary for the cobbler to step into a new role. Here he is no longer a combination producer and consumer, but merely a producer. As such, he first exchanges goods, purchasing power, for money, and then completes the cycle by exchanging money for labor. All right. And quoting from Dewey here in the same section. It should be noted that in his capacity as a producer, the cobbler puts nothing into the economic process and takes nothing out. In his capacity as a supplier of labor, he gets a portion of the proceeds that can be classified as wages. And in his capacity as a supplier of tools and equipment, he gets another portion as compensation for the use of that capital. The capital being, of course, the tools and equipment. In his capacity as a consumer, he exchanges the purchasing power thus obtained for consumer goods, perhaps putting some of it back into the business, retaining the ownership thereof. When each of these actions is viewed in its economic significance rather than in its social significance as actions of a single individual, it can be seen that all the proceeds of the business are paid out, actually or constructively, to the suppliers of labor and the supplier of capital. All of the net production of goods goes to consumers, and that's principle 5. Now let's look at the famous case of Robinson Crusoe. This is an example of a stage 1 economy. It's helpful in analyzing complex economic issues to first consider the isolated producer-consumer. Imagine that Robinson Crusoe is stranded on an otherwise uninhabited island in the middle of nowhere. Whatever he consumes, he must produce himself. There is no one to trade with, borrow from, steal from, or mooch from. Therefore, from equation 1-2, we have Beal sub real cons Robinson Crusoe, that's real purchasing power consumed, must equal the B sub real prod Robinson Crusoe, which means the real purchasing power produced by Robinson Crusoe. So consumption just equals production. In the later stages, many individuals try to live off of others by means of the state. But if someone gets something for nothing, then someone else gets nothing for something. Reference to page 119. As Bastiat says in the note in reference 26, the state is that great fiction by which everyone tries to live at the expense of everyone else. And I urge you to read that reference by Bastiat. All right, so subsection C, stage 2, Robinson Crusoe and Robin Crusoe. Now suppose a young woman named Robin washes up on shore and meets Robinson. Now they have each other, and so trade can be made in real goods and services. Consumption and production are now. So the real consumption of Robinson Crusoe plus the real consumption of Robin Crusoe must equal the real production of Robinson Crusoe and Robin Crusoe. Okay? It's pretty obvious. Now, subsection D, stage 3, we get to a small farm. Eventually, Robinson Crusoe and Robin Crusoe are rescued and come back to civilization. They become small farmers with no employees. They sell the farm's output for money, and with the proceeds, pay their expenses with money. So here we have purchasing power nominal consumed small farm must equal purchasing power nominal produced via the small farm. Okay, and nominal means currency. Subsection E, stage 4, representative producer retailer and representative worker consumer. The descendants of Robinson and Robin Crusoe live in a large nation state. The economic system is now in stage 4. In this stage, which is the modern stage, we have producer retailers and worker consumers. We will consider a representative producer retailer in a particular sector and a representative worker consumer. Assuming that both are rational and optimizing, they wish to maximize benefits minus costs, or to maximize the ratio of benefits to costs. So let's first look at the representative producer retailer. Because of the wide variation in the capital to labor ratio across business sectors, we have to consider individual sectors in order to properly compare companies. The representative producer retailer in a particular sector producing and selling final consumer goods wishes to maximize total revenue, to minimize total costs, and thus to maximize profit over time. Okay, now we have the symbols here. Let PV sub P underscore R equals the present value that is reflected back to time 0 of a particular producer retailer in a particular business sector. and that's in dollars. Res sub P underscore R equals current equivalent monetary reserve of the producer retailer in dollars. T equals time period, subscript for the variable listed here in years. Capital T sub P sub R equals total number of time periods considered. That's the time horizon for the producer retailer in years. R sub, that's small r sub P underscore R equals nominal discount rate for time period representing perceived risks of the firm and the interest cost of borrowed funds, assumed not to change for periods T equals 1 all the way up to capital T underscore P sub R. Okay. Capital T R equals total revenue of average producer retailer in sector for time period small t. Capital TC equals total cost or expense of average producer retailer in sector for time period T, including any taxes, that's in dollars. N sub E equals number of employees of a particular producer retailer. K sub R, or just KR actually, is small capital R, equals, this is a very important factor. That's the coefficient of revenue productivity of producer retailer relative to that of the average firm in the sector, normalized to 1 for the average firm, and it may change for each period T. KC, that's a small capital C, equals coefficient of cost to producer retailer relative to that of the average firm in the sector, and which is normalized to 1 for the average firm, and that may change for each period. Then, the problem of the representative producer retailer is to maximize this equation here, equation 2,4. Just take a look at it. The present value underscore P sub R is equal to the sum over the periods T equal 1 to the total number of periods, capital T sub P underscore R. So this is going to be equal to N sub E. That's the number of employees in period T, times the difference between K sub R1 over N sub E1 times TR sub T minus K sub CT divided by N sub E T times TC over T, and then we get the discount factor 1 plus R sub P underscore R raised to the Tth power plus whatever reserves we have, P underscore R 0. Okay? That's the basic equation that we wish to maximize for the producer retailer. The total revenue equals the price per unit times the number of units sold for each product line plus any investment income. The total costs include materials, energy purchases, wages paid to employees, interest paid for the services of capital, and principal paid back to lenders, and any taxes. The values of the parameters are calculated by extrapolation from past periods, if available, or by projection, if not. See the worked example below. All right, let's see if we can get this. We've got 2 minutes to go here. For each period by inspection, B, that's the purchasing power produced nominal by the firm equals K sub R1 times T R sub T, that's in each period, and B consumed nominally by the firm equals K sub C T times TC sub T. The difference, the profit or net earnings in each period, goes into the company's reserves or is plowed back or is paid out in dividends to shareholders. So the reserve equals P sub or res sub P sub R sub T was B sub prod underscore nom underscore firm minus that which is consumed by the firm in nominal terms. Okay, so that's the reserve. The reserves are actually owned by the suppliers of capital, and so the firm actually gets nothing, which is principle 5. If total revenue is less than total cost for a period, then the reserves will have to be drawn down. For long-term survival of the firm, the managers must try each period to 1, increase the ratio of K sub R over N sub E, that is, increase relative revenue productivity per employee, decrease K sub C divided by N sub E, that is, reduce the relative cost per employee, and increase the reserves. Increase the reserves to get through tough times, like a recession or depression. The author has devoted much of his career to applied optimization for managers, engineers, and scientists, and you can see my works there, like optimal manager, optimal engineer, and optimal scientist. The coefficients K sub R and K sub C are normalized so that the average firm in the particular industry sector, the values are equal to 1. The more successful firm will have a higher value of K sub R and a lower value of K sub C, and vice versa for a less successful firm. Many phenomena, including the distribution of individual IQs, follow the Bell curve or Gaussian probability distribution. So we can assume that this distribution applies to the coefficients. The ratio of Kr to Kc